Prime Minister requests solution to boost business activities. And solution to promote green capital. Hello there and welcome to Bizline, our weekly economic journals on VTV International. I'm Nguồn, and as usual, we'll now look at the new making headlines in Vietnam economic scene this week.
Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh has recently sent an express document to the State Bank of Vietnam, SBV, with guidance on several important issues. Specifically, the Prime Minister ordered the SBV to proactively, flexibly, and timely deploy solutions to boost business activities and job creation. The Prime Minister also requested the SBV study and absorb the recommendations and reviews to continue to amend and supplement Circular 06, which seeks to remove regulations that create obstacles for businesses and credit institutions. In rapid response to the Prime Minister, the SBV has suspended the implementation of some clauses in the circular to make it easier for borrowers to get bank loans.
Implementing the Prime Minister's directive to ensure strong national food security and promote sustainable production and rice exports in this period, the General Department of State Reserves will closely monitor market developments, forecast climate change, natural disasters, and epidemics, and ensure food security and local export demand. The General Department of State Reserves also closely coordinates with relevant ministries and branches, promptly advises and submits to the Ministry and the Prime Minister supplements to the plan and forecasts for 2023 to purchase additional food for the National Reserve if necessary. At the same time, the General Department also plans to buy food in 2024 to maintain an appropriate reserve level.
The UK-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, UKVFTA, has significantly impacted Vietnam's export-oriented industries, driving growth and opening up new opportunities for both countries. According to a Ministry of Industry and Trade report, trade between Vietnam and the UK reached $6.8 billion in 2022, up 3.3% year-on-year. Vietnam's exports to the UK played a major role in the achievement, with goods like textiles, electronics, and agricultural products welcomed for their quality and affordability by UK consumers. Despite the opportunities presented by the UKVFTA, experts have warned that local firms will face tough competition from foreign rivals. Local enterprises must focus on enhancing their productivity and efficiency, improving their product quality and branding, and seeking innovative ways to remain competitive.
There were some highlights from Vietnam's economic scene. In our crosstalk, we will discuss measures to develop solutions to opening up a green capital mobilization channel in Vietnam. According to the World Bank's calculation, Vietnam needs an additional $368 billion during 2022-2040 period, which is approximately 6.8% of GDP each year, to achieve net zero emissions. And to accomplish this goal, Vietnam is actively implementing a roadmap for an improved legal framework to better attract green finance and technology and encourage green productions and investment. However, the growth of green credit in Vietnam has remained limited due to the lack of a clear legal framework. Commercial banks providing green capital do not have specific environmental and risk management criteria. Credit institutions are facing many difficulties in developing processes, regulations, preferential policies, and products for businesses in this field. Therefore, it is crucial to establish standards for opening up a green capital mobilization channel, supporting businesses in the field, and promoting the entire economy toward sustainable development. And in this week's Bizline, we will explore the standards necessary to achieve these objectives. But first, let's take a look at the following video to better understand Vietnam's potential for attracting green capital and developing green finance.
According to experts, the green financial market in Vietnam has seen many positive changes. Vietnamese businesses have initially attracted green bond capital in the international market. The carbon market promises to bring new and sustainable sources of income for Vietnam's agriculture and forestry in the future. Vietnamese credit institutions have taken the initiative to access international capital sources for green credit, promulgating internal regulations on the green credit framework.
I think the potential for green energy investment in Vietnam is really very significant. From that commitment to energy transition, we'll see a movement from traditional energy sources to new and clean energy sources. The policy direction is there, the planning is there, and so the pathway for private sector investment into significant amounts of clean energy development is very much been established.
Mechanisms and policies for the green financial market in Vietnam are being gradually improved in each type of instrument, such as Green Society Sustainable Bonds, GSS, green stocks, carbon markets, and green credit. The current regulatory environment is relatively open for green financial products in Vietnam. It helps businesses mobilize domestic and international green capital.
We have seen since the announcement last November of Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh, there is really Vietnam has become the radar screen of most of the international banks, development banks.
It is evident that while the interest rate for green credits is attractive, it is still challenging for businesses to access green capital. And to simplify the application process for green loans, businesses require support from the government in the form of policies. And to discuss this issue, we have Ms. Trần Thị Thúy Ngọc, Deputy CEO of Deloitte Vietnam, and Mr. Daniel Small, Head of Structures, Banking and Sustainable Finance at HSBC Vietnam with us today. And we thank our guests for joining us. Green finance is a global trend that involves the participations of international financial institutions, national governments, and financial system in each country and region. So what roles does green finance play in supporting Vietnam's sustainable development goals?
Yeah, I think as you rightly mentioned, right, it's going green is now kind of considered mainstream globally. I think World Bank and others have done studies to kind of show the impact from climate change if Vietnam doesn't adapt with regards to kind of rising sea levels and impact to GDP. I think green and that transition finance as well actually has a significant role to play. There's going to be a need for hundreds of billions of dollars, right, to finance the shift away from coal and put more focus into renewables and particularly offshore wind. So green finance is going to play a huge role in that. And also making sure that Vietnam as a country has sufficient access to clean, but also reliable energy going forward.
In addition to that, green finance is also defined as a financial support towards green growth through meaningful reduction of the greenhouse gas emission, as well as environmental pollution. Vietnam's investment volume in projects to reduce environmental impact will soar in the near future. Therefore, green finance play a vital role in Vietnam's sustainable development goal.
The Vietnamese government has developed legal framework for green finance, along with decrees that clarify regulations on funding and accessing capital for green productions. So what are your thoughts on the developments of green finance in Vietnam?
Yeah, the legal framework on green finance began to be developed when the Prime Minister approved the National Action Plan on Green Growth for the period of 2014 to 2030. Vietnam is approaching through the aspect of fields and location. However, these policies have been implemented over a long period of more than 30 years. Therefore, the Ministry of Planning and Investment is researching to develop a new mechanism, new system of policy, and new approach to match this strategy as well as international practice.
The commitments that were made at COP26 with regards to net zero are ambitious, but they've also helped accelerate the interest in green growth and green financing as well. So I was reading through a report by SBV, and they mentioned that there's around 40 or so kind of financial institutions providing green capital at the minute, and it's been growing at roughly 20% year on year, which is, I guess, faster than the kind of overall credit growth for non-green loans. The number of financial institutions providing green loans has also been increasing at roughly, I think, over 2 times in the last 2 years. So I think it's trending in the right direction, but still quite a long way to go.
So, Mr. Daniel, what is your opinion on Vietnam's efforts to promote and develop legal framework for green finance?
Yeah, look, this is not an easy task, right? And it's great to see the efforts of the ministries and the regulator to, I guess, help set the tone on kind of the legal framework for green finance. Because whilst there's the vision through to 2050, that's still quite a long way away. And a lot of businesses here are at the beginning of their journey, let's be honest, and they may find it difficult really knowing where to start, or really where to, I guess, start their transition journeys, or really kind of understand what the material issues for them are in any given sector. I think it's important for the government to understand the barriers that are in place at the minute for preventing customers or clients setting net zero targets, and then helping to develop a robust kind of disclosure and reporting requirement.
According to preliminary calculations by the Ministry of Planning and Investment and the World Bank, Vietnam needs about $30 billion to implement the green growth strategy until 2030. The state budget can only meet a maximum of approximately 30%. The remaining 70% will need to come from the private sector.
Because Vietnamese private sector is one of the most dynamic private sectors in the world. And the private sector savings in Vietnam is almost 20% of GDP, which is again one of the highest in the world. So clearly we have a highly liquid private sector. They have the resources.
Given that green growth is an inevitable choice, countries, including Vietnam, are forced to make more efforts in attracting private resources into their transition.
Countries are looking very carefully at how to build a more sustainable energy system. So we have to do a good job in order to attract those dollars.
However, Vietnam has not had an overall and unified legal framework and policies related to the implementation of green credit. The country also lacks environmental criteria, incentive tools, and risk management for commercial banks. Many businesses face the challenge of implementing the circular economy, an important part of the goal of sustainable development.
Within the business environment, there are different interpretations and different understanding levels of what green is. I mean, if you are a relatively small Vietnamese company or an SME, for example, then you probably won't have a fairly sophisticated understanding of what green is, or what, how to access green financing, or who are the financial institutions who could provide funding, and then what are the conditions under which that funding is provided.
So if you run a factory in Vietnam, it is really difficult to access green energy. If you were opening a factory in the Nordic countries, you would be able to just plug in your machine and buy quotas on green energy. So there is a lot of inflexibility in the system on how you purchase this. If you produce your own energy in an industrial zone, how can you access that? How much can you access?
Mr. Daniel, despite Vietnam having many regulations for the implementation of green credit, many businesses are facing challenges when implementing a circular economy. In your opinion, what are the reasons for this?
The implementation process, I think, is still new and difficult for a lot of corporates to understand. The circular economy can be applied differently to different sectors and industries. So there's kind of no guideline or consensus of what is kind of circular economy across each different sector, noting that some may have certain kind of practices or policies versus others. We have to be mindful that in Vietnam, over 90% of the economy are SMEs, right? And actually their understanding of circular economy may be different to a large corporate, either domestic or international.
Many people believe that despite regulations, green capital still flows slowly due to the lack of clear guidelines and regulations for controlling emissions, as well as defining what is green in a specific area. So what are your thoughts on this?
Specific regulation and definition on green category and industry sector have not been agreed yet. So they are not applicable across the country. This makes it difficult for commercial banks to select, appraise, and evaluate, as well as monitor when granting the green finance or green credit or green loan. At the same time, the green sector still lack of the legal framework, assessment criteria, and tool for measuring environmental impact to support the development of policy and products for green credit implementation.
This waste treatment plant has tripled its loan limit. Waste is burned, and instead of releasing heat to the environment, the heat is recycled for production. The factory is planning to expand its scale.
Chúng tôi luôn hướng đến xây dựng mô hình kinh tế tuần hoàn, tức là chất thải của một quá trình sản xuất này là nguyên vật liệu của quá trình sản xuất khác. Các chính sách ưu đãi về lãi suất đã tiếp sức cho doanh nghiệp phục hồi và phát triển.
Green finance is a global trend that involves the participation of international financial institutions, national governments, and financial systems in each country and region. This is inevitable in Vietnam. The country is implementing a green growth strategy and witnessing the green financial market develop faster. Many businesses have initially attracted green bond capital in the international market. Credit institutions have proactively approached international sources of capital for green credit and promulgated internal regulations on green credit frameworks.
Everybody that can get on the table, make sure the local developers have a chance to get involved, make sure international developers have a chance to get involved, and recognize there are lots of different types of developers out there. Some people relying on bank balance, some people bringing international funds. These are all stable mechanisms used throughout the globe. So make sure you make full opportunity to pull from all the different types of commercial bodies that there are out there.
Green projects often enjoy preferential interest rates of 0.5 to 1% per year. However, there is still no unified set of criteria for green projects, so it is difficult for businesses to access and also for banks to issue green loans.
Tín dụng xanh là một lĩnh vực mới, đòi hỏi yếu tố kỹ thuật về môi trường, nên gây khó khăn cho cán bộ tín dụng trong việc thẩm định.
Ban hành một cái thông tư 17 đảm bảo được cái mục tiêu, cái yêu cầu về cái quản lý rủi ro môi trường trong cái hoạt động cấp tín dụng. Thế bên cạnh đó thì cũng đã và đang phối hợp cùng với các bộ ngành để xây dựng cái danh mục những cái dự án xanh. Một cái hành lang pháp lý tương đối thuận lợi rõ ràng.
The State Bank of Vietnam is also working on proposals for mechanisms for commercial banks to participate in green financing. The path for green capital flows to green projects is expected to be increasingly smooth.
Although there are regulations on environmental criteria and certification for green credit granted projects, some people believe that having too many separate standards for green products can reduce market efficiencies and discourage issuers and investors. So what regulations do you think Vietnam should have in place to avoid having asynchronous and unclear regulations?
I think it's very important for Vietnam to have the detailed guidance for specific sector to promote this green financing. To synchronize unclear situation, Vietnam needs to accelerate the completion of the mechanism and policy, including a sandbox for new business model to promote the development of the green bond, green stock, or even green credit market.
Vietnam and a group of international partners have announced the partnership agreement on equitable energy transitions. The agreement aims to mobilize $15.5 billion in public and private financings over the next 3 to 5 years to support the green transitions. However, this amount is still very small compared to the World Bank's estimate of $380 billion needed to achieve the net zero emission target. So where can Vietnam raise additional capital to achieve this target?
I think what that immediately says is that the JETP is not going to solve all of kind of Vietnam's transition strategy or financing required to achieve that transition. But really what the JETP funding should be seen as is a catalyst. Half of that commitment is coming from private financing, and then the other half being made up from the public sector.
15.5 billion is huge, but actually to do net zero, that amount is very small. So in order to meet the capital need for the implementation of the above projects, apart from the domestic enterprise resources, cooperation with investment fund, especially for the foreign investment fund, is very vital. And I think international organizations have recommended to Vietnam on financial mobilization solution, including linking climate commitments to green and feasible projects, promoting public and private cooperation, and consulting international experience on green finance.
In the past 2 years, the number of foreign organizations providing green credit to Vietnam has increased 2.5 times compared to previous years, accounting for most of the more than $7 billion in international mobilized capital.
One of the first milestones has been and gone fantastically. In mid-May, we got Power Development Plan 8 delivered, which was a really good milestone to get past. We've got a framework in place. Now we need to take this into the implementation stage. I've worked in many markets myself, and CIP as a company works across the globe. The potential is massive.
The green economic development trend in Vietnam is only at the starting point. Capital sources and technologies are problems that many developing countries like Vietnam face when developing a green economy.
Working together with our big European companies like CIP, COP, like Vestas, like Equinor, all these big companies with experience, we should encourage them to come to Vietnam, to transfer technology, and Vietnam will benefit from advantageous financing.
I think certainly there's a lot more training that needs to be done, but it's a growing sector, absolutely. Policy initiative, and then that would also help foster a training mindset towards green thinking and green practice, because ultimately it's Vietnamese enterprises really that are going to make the difference in this.
The European Union positions Vietnam as one of the most important partners in the region. It has provided grants of up to €210 million between 2021 and 2024 to advance common interests in many fields. Making good use of international cooperation in both the public and private sectors will facilitate Vietnam's journey in bolstering the green economy.
Green credit do not equate to cheap offset credit. Funding green projects that use high technologies can be expensive. In addition, operation may cost more than traditional production methods. So what do businesses need to do to gain access to green capital?
I think there's a few kind of key points where businesses need or should kind of adopt to be able to attract green credit. I think the first is having a clear strategy and a well kind of defined commitment to net zero or a medium commitment towards reducing the emissions that they have today. We would always recommend or often recommend using third-party verification or assurance on impact assessment or on projects. So a second-party opinion is also often recommended. I think access to data understanding our client strategy and the targets that they have in place are all important pieces to consider when trying to raise green credit.
And what are your thoughts on the potentials for unlocking green capital and the green credit market in Vietnam in the near future?
98% of Vietnam macros and small and medium-sized enterprise have limited resource in order to transform their business into sustainability. They don't understand what green development is and the benefits as well as opportunity in the circular economy. So I think bring awareness, show them the benefit, show them the opportunity, show them about the long legacy of the sustainability would be the credential for them to follow.
There's huge potential, right? I think we've already talked to the investment required in the power sector, and the renewable energy sector is expected to make up anywhere between 30 to 45% of Vietnam's energy output by 2030. So power, there is huge potential. But also, I mean, for the manufacturing sector as well, there is huge potential as businesses look to green their supply chain. If Vietnam as a country was to look at kind of issuing some form of bond or green bond or sustainable bond, that would also help, I guess. We remain very optimistic on the opportunity.
Well, once again, thank you, our guests, for joining our program today. Experts suggest that Vietnam faces a challenge in unlocking capital for green growth due to the lack of transparent pricing mechanisms. This makes it difficult for investors to access the financial viability for businesses. The government is taking steps to address this issue by completing the legal framework for green credit. A draft decision by the Prime Minister outlining regulations on environmental criteria and their certification of green credit and green bond issuance project is currently being finalized. Once officially issued, this draft will contribute to promoting the issuance of green bonds and green credits, creating a boost for the growth of the green capital channel in 2023 and beyond. Vietnam is working towards becoming an attractive destination for international green capital by improving its legal environment. Financial institutions and businesses are making efforts to develop a circular economy and a green finance system that effectively mobilizes green investment capital for sustainable development. And that also wrapped up today's edition of Bizline. To rewatch the program, you can log on to vtv4.vn or download our mobile application VTV4. Thanks for watching and see you next week.